On today's show, the Hawks trail by as many as 30 points in the first half against the Celtics on this Monday evening, and then they come back in grand fashion for their most improbable victory of the season. We'll get into how it transpired, what it means, and much more, and all that is on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland. I host the Locked On Hawks podcast, and you are about to hear episode 1681 of the show. Unfortunately, I've been dealing with some internet issues. I'm actually recording this little intro from the actual arena at State Farm Arena, but at home, internet problems all the way through. So most of the podcast that you're about to hear was recorded offline, and you're not going to have my video necessarily attached to it. But I want to give you that preview to kind of let you know what transpired there. But other than that, the show is coming to you as usual. And please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcast, especially on the audio channels like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And here we go with the show. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1681 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening, deep into the night here into Tuesday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. The place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Also, I'd encourage you, on top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out here on the Locked On Hawks podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify. We're also on YouTube on the video side as you are watching this podcast. And today's show is going to be breaking down what became a pretty crazy result in Atlanta. Final score 120-118 in favor of the Hawks. And if that is all you knew about this game, it would have been an upset for sure, as we'll talk about in a second. But it would not have seemed quite as crazy as what actually transpired. But for the full context, you got to know this. The Celtics led this game 68-38 late in the first half. They were up by 30 points late in the first half. The rest of the game went 82-50 in favor of the Hawks, and the majority of that deficit of 30 points went away in about 9 minutes. From the end of the first half to the start of the third quarter, the Hawks had a huge run to go from basically down by 30 to down by 3, and from that point forward, it was pretty close fought back and forth. It could have gone either way down the stretch, but the Hawks managed to steal this victory. It was their largest comeback for the Hawks since the play-by-play era began. Started for tracking purposes, basically. Before that, the NBA is a little bit less clear on this kind of stat for comebacks and possessions, but at the very least, the largest comeback by the Hawks since at least 1996. So a very, very long time. Before this, that was a 27-point mark, also against Boston back in 2013, a game that I actually remember covering in depth as a younger person covering the Hawks at that point in time. But this is only the only ninth comeback of 30 points or more in NBA history since that play-by-play era began, and the first since 2022. So some serious history being made here from the Hawks to erase a massive deficit. I think, just casually speaking, being down by 30 against the number one team in the entire league, coming back and winning is a pretty big stunner in a lot of different ways. But you could certainly say this is, it's one game out of 82. I would always kind of preach that and being a little bit responsible with what you're trying to say and all that stuff and nuance, and I will definitely do that throughout this podcast. At the same time, it was an incredibly fun roller coaster kind of game in Atlanta, an all-time comeback for the Hawks. A lot went right in the last 2.5 quarters of this game, and really a fun night at the office on a Monday. So a stunning victory in a lot of ways. We'll talk about it as we always do. And if you're a new listener, what we do on this podcast is a ways to try to give you the whole picture on the Hawks. I've been covering the team for more than a decade at this point in time, giving you all of the angles that you're looking for. Hopefully you will enjoy this deep dive into what was a memorable game in a lot of different ways. So we'll go back to the beginning now and just say, pregame, the Hawks are still incredibly banged up injury-wise. They were, in fact, missing 8 guys in this game, headlined by Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, Saddiq Bey. 4 of their top 8 players are still out for the Hawks, plus their key young guys, Kobe Buffkin, AJ Griffin, etc. Nothing further on the updates, by the way, on Jalen or Onyeka at this point in time. Trae Young is due for a reevaluation sometime in the very near future. It would not stun me if we heard something about Trae on Tuesday, but TBD on that. Nothing that we've heard so far. Boston, by the way, was also shorthanded a little bit here in this game as well. No Derek White, no Drew Holiday, and no Xavier Tillman. So 2 of their top 6 players plus another rotational big man. So it wasn't like Boston was healthy either, but still, the Hawks were certainly the least healthy team in this game. And through that lens, the Hawks were actually 10.5-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel, in this game. What does that mean? Basically, even if you're not into the betting line stuff, kind of can inform the projections of certain games. Only the second time all year long that the Hawks were underdogs by at least 10 points. Second time all year. So that kind of tells you how uphill battle they were supposed to be fighting in this game. The other time was also against Boston, by the way, and again, they ended up losing on the road. But still, all you need to know about the point spread there is that the Hawks were big underdogs in this game, and for good reason. But obviously, we talked about the big picture already, and we'll talk about the offense and defense in a second when it comes to the nuances of how they performed in this game on both ends of the floor. But I want to reiterate this, just how wild the splits were in this game from first quarter and a half to last 2.5 quarters, essentially. The first 20 minutes, the last 28 minutes in this game. Having a 30-point deficit was not even really a fluke. If you watch this game and charted the numbers and all of that stuff, eye test, stats, the Hawks being down 30 was not really a fluke. Boston played well, to be sure, and honestly, I thought the Hawks were pretty awful for about a quarter and a half of this game. Boston is of course very good, and they played really well too early on, but you don't really compile a 30-point deficit on your own, or sort of on purposely on the other team being themselves. It takes both teams in any direction to both accrue this kind of margin and also give that kind of margin away. Keep that in mind throughout this podcast. But then after that, the Hawks played much better, and they deserve credit for that. But also they had the variance or the fortune, or if you want to use the word luck, whatever word you want to use there, they had all of that on their side in the last 2.5 quarters of this game. And by the way, that's what it takes to overcome a 30-point deficit against anyone, much less a great team like where Boston is right now. And the combination of the Hawks being improved and the shooting variance breaking towards the Hawks explained kind of what in the world happened here at the end of the day. So first I'll go to the offense for Atlanta, which is their best side of the floor in this game. They had about a 129 offensive rating in the entire game. That is a crazy turnaround after only scoring 22 points in the first quarter. It was a monster improvement. The number one thing in this game, aside from just the absolute madness of the margin, was basically the 3-point shooting on both sides. And just so you know, that is very typical in the modern NBA, especially when you have a huge kind of gap there to kind of explain what transpired. Oftentimes, that will be a huge harbinger of what is to come. The Hawks finished this game 18 of 36 from 3. That's, of course, half of their threes went in this game. That includes 11 of 19 in the second half. And honestly, you're going to win a lot when you make half your threes. But obviously, they needed all of them to win this game. And as we'll talk about in a second, Boston had an incredibly brutal 3-point shooting run on their side of things. So that combination really helped to lead the Hawks to this win. But it was not just the shooting. The Hawks did a great job on the glass in this game offensively. They had 15 offensive rebounds, including 5 by Capella. There was one huge one at the very end of the game. Also, only 13 turnovers in this game, which isn't crazy impressive, but certainly is good enough. And as I talked about several times lately, when teams make threes, they generally have good assist numbers. Those things are pretty heavily correlated, and that happened here again. The Hawks had 30 assists, and a lot of those were on the 18 threes that they made over the course of this game. Also really balanced scoring-wise offensively in this one. They had 6 guys score at least 13 points, and no one scored more than 24 points. So very balanced across the board there. And 8 of the 10 guys who appeared in the game for the Hawks ended up scoring a point. Of those 8 players, 7 of them shot the ball well in the game. The only guy who didn't shoot the ball well was DeJounte Murray, and he made up for that in other ways, including 15 assists at the point of attack. So basically, everyone shot well or had a big assist game, and that kind of leads to positive results on offense. Defensively, it was certainly a mixed bag. I would say even factoring in the second half, it was pretty poor overall. They gave up an insane scoring barrage in the first quarter and a half. Still ended up this game with about a 127 defensive rating. That's not good, of course. I want to make sure to give the Hawks credit, though, because they were much better in the second half of this game and not giving the Boston their number one option on offense. In the first half, it was a lot of Boston getting like easy looks, not only at the rim, but also wide open threes. And in the second half, and it's something Joe Mazzulla said after the game as well, the Celtics head coach, The Hawks were better intensity-wise. They had better ball pressure. They were more physical in the second half. And that there's a lot of credit to be given to the Hawks defense for how they played, even if a lot of the national reaction, I'm sure, is that Boston kind of melted down, which is also kind of true in this game. But at the very least, the Hawks took away the easy stuff, forced Boston into their worst tendencies. Boston tends to settle for bad jump shots sometimes. That happened a lot in the second half of this game. Again, credit to the Hawks for that. That was on full display. And on the other side of things, of course, it is a make or miss league. If you are a new listener to the podcast, you might think that I'm being a homer here, and I'm not, or the opposite. I try to give you the nuance here. I cover the Hawks, yes, but I also try to give you the actual sort of unbiased viewpoint. And a lot of times in the NBA these days, it's a make or miss league, and that's a cliche, but it's also true. And if you were, that's kind of where I want to kind of give you the whole picture there. The Hawks shot, again, 50% from three in this game. They were 18 of 36. Boston, who is a better shooting team than the Hawks are, they were 11 of 38 from three. That's 29%. That alone counts for a 21-point swing on essentially the same number of attempts. So right there, if all you knew about this game coming in was the Hawks were going to shoot well from three and Boston was going to shoot poorly from three, advantage Hawks. The comeback also was heavily traced to that. In the second half, the Hawks were 11 of 19 from three. That's obviously excellent. The Celtics were literally 1 of 15 from three. In fact, they missed 18 of their last 19 three-point attempts. So earlier I said it takes two to tango, basically. That is a good example of that. The Hawks played better defense. That's certainly true. But Boston literally missed 18 of their last 19 threes. And if they made even one of them, could have been a different game. So some of those were really bad shots, by the way. Again, that's credit to the Hawks. It's not all variance either. There's always a little bit of nuance here. But you have to have some things break your way to erase a 30-point deficit in any game, especially against a good team. And Boston just couldn't make a shot in the last 2.5 quarters of the game. So elsewhere on defense, they did a good job not fouling, I thought the Hawks did. Didn't make a lot of turnovers create in this game, but they did, when they actually did force them, they led to 20 points off of them, which is a good number on the whole. I thought they, I can sort of picture a couple of threes that they made in the second half of this game off turnovers. One of them was by Bogey at the very end. That was a big shot. I can't kind of unsee, I should say, how bad defensively the Hawks played in the first half. It all counts, and it was pretty rough, but they did improve throughout the game. The centers were pretty good the entire game. Guys like Vit Krejci and Wes Matthews gave them good minutes in the second half on defense in particular. And all that said, it was a mixed bag for sure. It was a total team effort, to be 100% sure, and a completely insane, fun basketball game in the middle of what has been a pretty trying and difficult season for the Hawks. They have underachieved this year. None of that has changed by this game. Frustration inside the team, outside the team about how they've played this year, all that. Injuries have been biting them for quite some time now. It's been a rough year in a lot of ways, but it was a fun, crazy atmosphere tonight in Atlanta, and really a memorable win on top of things. So it was incredibly resilient as well. I wouldn't draw huge conclusions from one game ever in any direction, especially one that's kind of an outlier in some ways. But again, it was a resilient performance. It was a tough-minded performance, and definitely the craziest and wildest win of the season. And we'll kind of leave it there for now. In a minute, though, I will tell you about our friends at PrizePicks. But before we get to that, later in the podcast, as I always do, but if you're a new listener, I will sort of get into the game flow in this game, how it all unfolded from start to finish. At the end of the show, we'll get into the player evaluations about how each and every guy who played the rotation appeared and how they played for the Hawks in this game. But first, a word from our friends at PrizePicks. Demons and Goblins are the newest and exciting ways to play at PrizePicks, and squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts at PrizePicks as well, with up to 100 times the money, and with just as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 at PrizePicks. If you want to play alongside some of the biggest names at PrizePicks as well, and favorite players as well, now find them under Community Plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each and every week. They also offer injury insurance, so their entries stay in play even if one of your players happens to be injured. It's really simple to play at PrizePicks as well. I make my picks in just a minute or less. It's just that easy, that brisk, and makes it convenient as well. They have quick withdrawals. They have easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of stat types and sports that you can't find anywhere else. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. I've been playing there for a while now. I really enjoy diving into all of the numbers on the basketball side, but even when baseball starts, football, women's college basketball, men's college basketball, NBA, etc. It's all there for you at PrizePicks. And the place to go is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. One more time, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. All right, and we'll dive in now to the beginning of this game, and obviously it was pretty rough for a while, so I'll kind of breeze through this a little bit. But they were down by 10 points pretty much right away, 15-5 at the outset. They were down 18 points after 6 minutes of the game. They tried to switch a lot defensively in the early going. They had some issues with that. They fouled three-point shooters. They were having guys put in tough positions, like Garrison Matthews had to guard Jason Tatum a few times in the post. Not going to work there. Boston was basically able to get good looks every single time down, and part of that is personnel based, right? The Hawks are battling injuries. They're playing guys that are overstretched. They're a little bit smaller than you want to be, and Boston is very good. So that was kind of expected on some level, but Steven, it got kind of ugly, as you might expect in this game. But it was, they were down 18 early. There was a nice little stretch in the middle of the quarter by the Hawks to get back within 13. But the push was kind of short-lived there. They were down 44-22 at the end of the first quarter. Boston was incredibly good offensively in that first period with 0 turnovers. Offensively, the Hawks had kind of a shaky performance at the outset. Only played 8 guys in the first quarter. It was only Garrison, Bruno, and Trent Forrest off the bench in that first period, but then they brought in Wes Matthews and Dylan Windler in the second quarter, so they put all 10 guys who were active for the Hawks in this one. Atlanta was down 49-22 after about 13 minutes of this game, and Boston at that point had 49 points on their first 26 possessions. That is about a 188 offensive rating, which is ludicrously high. It did get better from there, but with 5 minutes left in the half, the Hawks actually had 38 points, and the combination of Brown and Tatum for Boston had 36 points. So it was pretty grisly. The Hawks did close the half, though, very importantly, on a good run. And I'll say this now, if the Hawks had gone into the halftime break down 28, they wouldn't have won, in my opinion. Now, we'll never know, but they had an 18-6 run late in the first half. Boston got a little bit sloppy. Some jump shots that were missed, some turnovers. The Hawks made 8 of their last 12 shots, and they were down 18 at halftime after being down by 30. And now, being down 18 at halftime, the Hawks were huge underdogs to win the game, obviously. But they were kind of back into the game, or at least kind of sort of into the game, in a way that they weren't a few minutes before that. Capella had a big half, 14 points for him before halftime. Hunter had a good half as well. Defensively, it was still pretty dreadful, but the Hawks were at least back into it. And then the third quarter is where things swung even more. But I will say, I've heard lots of people talk about how it was a tale of two halves, the first half, second half. It should not be overlooked that the Hawks were able to cut into the lead significantly before halftime. That was a very, very important thing in my mind. Still, though, the third quarter was the big swing in a lot of ways. A 19-4 run by Atlanta to cut the lead down. In fact, the overall run by the Hawks was 37-10 in about 9 minutes. So they went from being down by 30 to down by 3 in 9 minutes. The Hawks were hot as a shooting team. Boston was really cold at that point in time. Also, Joe Mazzulla refused to call timeout. He's not a big timeout guy, but they were flailing for quite some time, and it felt like it was a pretty natural timeout spot. Never happened. And after all of that, it's a game again. Now, coming out of a timeout, Boston actually had an 8-0 run to kind of put the game back in a little bit of peril. But then Vít Krejci had a huge run of his own. So Hawks had cut it down to 3, back to 11. Then Vít had a personal 8-0 run that was really nice, actually. He hit a 3. He made a great read on a steal to get a deflection, and then later a run-out dunk. Then he had another 3. He was feeling it in a lot of different ways there. That got Vít to his career high, by the way. In this game, Vít set a new career high with, I believe it was, 16 points. Very impressive there. And an absolutely insane quarter. Now, the Hawks were down still 6 at the end of the third, but they won the quarter by 12 points, and Boston's three-point shooting really started to, let's just say, wax and wane at that point in time. Now, the Hawks actually scored the first 7 points of the fourth quarter, including a Wes Matthews 3 for the lead. That was their first lead of the entire game after they had been down by 30 points. And the disparity as a shooting team on both sides kind of continued. Garrison and Bogut hit back-to-back threes to actually put the Hawks up by 4 points. Boston had an absolute meltdown mid-quarter. They had an 8-second backcourt violation, just brain dead by Jason Tatum, just not pushing the ball over half court. Peyton Pritchard is a career 87% free throw shooter, and he missed 2 trips to the line. They were clearly imploding on some level. Still, though, it was tied, 6 minutes to go, and Quinn called timeout. there were lots of back and forth that I won't go through a ton of right now necessarily, but Tatum had a big dunk. Murray missed some free throws. Quinn did win a good challenge on a goaltending call that saved the Hawks a point. Only 1 point because they ended up scoring 1 point on possession after they got the ball back, but still an impactful and useful challenge that was won by Clint to erase a goaltending call that was a bad one on Capella after a nice block, by the way, by Clint. Hunter got to the rim a couple times. Murray drew a foul, split free throws in some ways. Back-to-back and back-to-back. Capella had a nice offensive rebound that actually will come back again. But Bogey hit what I would describe as a vintage Bogey 3 on the left wing in transition to put the Hawks up again with about 90 seconds to go. And that was a shot that I want to circle because that was not necessarily the biggest one of the game, but high on the list for me. Just DeJounte swinging it to Bogey, who was always going to shoot it. It was pure as driven snow. Great shot. And the Hawks picked the lead. Of course, Jaylen Brown did answer. And then DeJounte answered after that with a driving layup. Then Boston had what I thought was an absolutely awful possession with the Hawks up by 1. Jaylen Brown ended up having to kind of heave a bad shot at the end of the buzzer. He missed it badly. So the Hawks had the ball now, up by 1. Murray misses a jump shot. That wasn't a great look, but it was a makeable look for him. But then Capella gets a massive offensive rebound. And then from there, he kicks it out to DeAndre Hunter, who ends up making a three-pointer that was essentially the dagger in the game. Now, a lot happened here. For one, again, awesome rebound by Clint, and he's one of the best in the business at doing that. Clint sometimes will not kick the ball out as much as he probably should. In this game, though, he did that wisely, and also he is the worst free throw shooter on the floor for the Hawks at that point in time, and it was a must-foul situation. It was like 10 seconds to go, so once Clint gets the rebound, Boston has to foul, and they know it. But Clint gets the ball out of his hands, out to Hunter, who is wide open in his defense. But I got to say, Hunter should not have taken the shot. It was kind of like laughed and rolled the eyes a little bit. Hunter said he was always going to shoot it. I get all that. Quinn didn't throw him under the bus. I'll say it. It wasn't the smartest shot in the world, but he made it, and that's all that anybody cares about. If he misses it, it becomes a giant talking point, and I'm certainly the first to admit that. I didn't love the shot attempt, the process there, but Hunter takes it. He was wide open, shot it with confidence, makes it. They go up by 4 points, and that's basically the end of the game. So, yeah, I mean, does it matter necessarily? No, it went in. I just wanted to at least give you the whole process there. Hunter, big shot for him. That was the dagger. It wasn't 100% over, but it certainly felt like it when that shot went in. And it ended up kind of being on the right side from that point forward. So we'll leave it there for now. But it really was a ton of fireworks. Like really the whole fourth quarter, but mostly the last 6-8 minutes were really, really back and forth. Like no one was up by more than 4 points in that entire stretch. And the Hawks just made one more play, basically, than Boston did. And that ended up being what led them to a victory that was, again, very memorable and very exciting in this contest. All right, before the player evaluation stuff comes to mind, and I will talk about that in just 1 second. But first, a word from our folks at BetterHelp. This segment is sponsored by our sponsor of BetterHelp, and sometimes we actually need the opportunity to get something off of our chest. Big or small, certain things can be really starting to get to you if you let them. It's important to let that stuff out, especially someone who is unbiased on your life. So today I want to tell you about how I feel about something, and maybe for a few of you in a similar space you might happen to understand. And all of that is that I think that there is some unease about, in my mind anyway, about the next steps in the media industry right now. I'm not talking about what's reported about the Hawks, of course, but whether there'll be actually jobs available for what I do, whether the work that I do in different ways will actually be able to be continuing it how it is now. Of course, not the most intense or life-altering topic for everybody in the world, but therapy can not be different for everybody. It's really sort of tailored to you, and most of us, including me, have bigger problems and stuff involving sports at all, but it is quite important to get stuff off your chest for once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule, and the place to go is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. Get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. One more time, the place to go is betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. All right, into the player stuff in this game, and a lot of guys played well. It was certainly waxing and waning from the first half, but on the whole, in the end, it was a positive. Windler and Forrest played very little in this game. Windler played 2 minutes. He was actually -4. Trent only played 7 minutes, with DeJounte playing 41 in this game. 2 rebounds for Trent in 4 minutes. 7 minutes. He was -4, had a block. He didn't do too much on offense. The Hawks were unable to score at a high level without DeJounte on the floor. No surprise there right now without Trey. Bruno Fernando was really good in this game. Good energy. 13.3 rebounds and 3 assists for Bruno in 19 minutes, I should say. Quinn gave him a lot of praise after the game for his energy, and I would certainly agree with that. Bruno is infectious. Everyone loves Bruno. He had a career high night on Saturday in the blowout win over Charlotte. But it was a fun one at the office for Bruno. He was very, very intense and gave them a lot of jolt in the arm when they kind of had to have that. Wes Matthews in the first half was pretty shaky. In the second half, he was much, much better. Good defensively, especially. 6 points, 4 rebounds, hit 2 threes. And Quinn even sort of admitted tonight that Wes is playing more than he thought he was going to play. I agree with that. They kind of signed Wes as a veteran stopgap kind of guy, and the Hawks have been so banged up that he's had to play, but he's been giving them good minutes, and he's a very resilient kind of piece to have on the roster. Garrison Matthews, 19 minutes, 2 of 2 from 3. First half, pretty shaky for Garrison as well. I thought Garrison and Wes both were not very good before halftime, but in the second half, they were both quite good. Garrison has been physical. He's obviously a respected shooter across the league, and he played well after halftime in this game. To the starters, everyone basically did their thing in a positive way. So Capella played the fewest minutes, 29, had 14 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, plus 6. He played very well in this game. He had one missed bunny that people remember, and I get that, but he was quite good, I thought, in this one. And Clint's been playing very well for a few weeks now, so he was an important piece, I should say, of this victory. DeAndre Hunter hit the big dagger at the end. 24 points to actually lead the Hawks in scoring, 7 rebounds, 3 assists for DeAndre. Hit 4 threes in the game. He was 4-6 on 2s as well. Efficient, productive, and obviously he was the primary defender a lot on either Tatum or Brown when he was on the floor, as he would be always. Bogey hit the huge 3 at the end that I noted before, but he was always very effective as he always is on offense. 22 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds. He was 4 of 8 on 2s, 4 of 7 from 3, and plus 7, a game best there for the Hawks. Vit Krejci had a big game here. 16 points, a career high for him. 6 rebounds, 2 steals, an assist. He was 2 of 4 on 2s, but actually was 4 of 7 on 3s. He's been shooting the ball much more aggressively in recent days. And also Vit's defense, I've talked about a lot in the last couple of weeks, but it's come a long, long, long way. He was complimentary of the College Park staff, etc. A great breakout night for Vit. It was fun to see that. The run that was 8-0 by himself was probably the most fun of the entire time for the Vit, sort of the Vit-centered approach there, but he's been playing very well in recent days. He's still a little bit stretched as a starter, but I think he's playing a lot of minutes right now because he has to, and that's been a huge, huge boon for the Hawks. He's been able to do that without kind of getting them killed on the wing. And then DeJounte Murray, I said it before, was the one guy who didn't really shoot it very well in this game. He was actually only 6 of 30. Actually, he was 2 of 9 on 3s, 6 of 13 on 2s. So 1 of 4 at the free throw line. Like didn't shoot it well, flat out. But 19 points, 15 assists for DeJounte, and 1 turnover. That's a huge ratio there. So obviously it was a little bit of a mixed bag, but the passing was there in a couple big plays. He's the one that set that 3 out by Bogey at the end of the game. So a strong performance across the board for the Hawks. No one was like absolutely incredible in this game, but most guys played pretty well. And that's kind of what it took across the board to get this victory across the finish line. So one note here on the standings before we get out of here on this podcast. I said a little bit earlier this week and into the weekend that the Hawks getting the 9 seed was much, much more likely than falling out of the play-in entirely because of the lead they had on the 10 seed and all of that. That's even more so the case now because Chicago lost tonight. So the Hawks are now within a game and a half of the 9 seed. Now, granted, the Bulls have the tiebreaker over the Hawks. They won the first 2 games against them, so it's actually 2.5 games functionally behind the Bulls, but they play the Bulls again one more time. That gives them an opportunity to kind of beat them head-to-head if they want to do that and make a run at the 9 seed. And also, a game and a half, 2.5 games, it's doable. The Hawks are now like at least within striking distance of the 9 seed. You know, how much does that actually matter? It's just a home game in the play-in versus a road game, but it'd be useful to have for sure for the Hawks. So keep an eye on that. They're also 5.5 games up on the Nets with 11 to play. I believe that even if the Hawks lost every game the rest of the year, which I am not predicting, but even if they did, they would probably still make the play-in because I don't think the Nets are going to go better than 500 the rest of the way, if I had to guess. So the Hawks are 99% probably favorites to make the play-in, at least. It's not wrapped up yet, but at least that is notable if you are tracking that kind of stuff right now. And from here, the Hawks are off again on Tuesday. Then they have a back-to-back at home on Wednesday and Thursday. I mentioned it on the show over the weekend. Boston is actually staying in Atlanta and playing the Hawks again on Thursday. A little bit of a weird thing there because the Hawks play a game in between. The Hawks play the Blazers at home on Wednesday. so that's notable. Also, College Park and Maine, who is the Celtics affiliate, they play each other this week as well. So it's a lot of Celtics-Hawks stuff, but in the middle of that, the Hawks play the Blazers at home. Atlanta will try to avenge a loss to Portland on the West Coast trip. They'll be favored in that game, most likely, even if they are shorthanded, as they have been the entire time. We'll have more on that later on this week. We could get an injury update or something on Onyeka or Trey, etc. on Tuesday, so stay tuned for all of that as well. Also, please follow my written work on the Hawks. It's at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Follow the show on Twitter /X at Locked On Hawks. I'm also on there at BT Rowland if you want to follow along there. And please subscribe to the podcast. For one, if you are an audio-only subscriber, you get the folks at Locked On Sports Atlanta giving you their postcast episodes in the same feeds. They have their own YouTube channel, but if you're looking on the audio side, those podcasts will be there as well. Nothing less from me ever. Still the full same allotment of almost 1,700 episodes, so plenty to come from me. But ratings, reviews, shares, likes on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, also YouTube, etc. is always appreciated. And please tell a friend about the podcast. It's the best thing you can do with the show, other than just downloading it and supporting our sponsors, to spread the word for us. I really appreciate that as well. Again, a fun game. It was a wild one, to be sure. Lots of highs and lows. It's a very late podcast because of all of that stuff and logistics. But thank you for listening to the podcast. As always, subscribe to the show, and we'll see you all next time.